Autumn 668. The most fortified city in Northeast Asia is a month under siege and holding. Its kingdom has broken one Chinese empire and turned back another. For 70 years no army has forced these walls. Tonight none will. A Buddhist monk, trusted with the city's last defense, walks down to the gates of Pyongyang and opens them from the inside. You know this kingdom, Goguryeo. Burned twice, rebuilt twice, master of Northeast Asia. Last episode ended on a warning that golden age rested on a divided China. This series has one refrain: defeated and then rebuilt. This episode inverts it. Hold the question: what destroys a kingdom the largest armies ever recorded could not, because it wasn't the armies. In 589 the warning came true. After 3 centuries of division, China unified under a new dynasty, the Sui. The demands came fast: end your border raids, drop your steppe alliances, submit. Goguryeo, an independent kingdom for 6 centuries, answered with one word: parity. Both sides began preparing for war. King Yeon didn't wait. In 598 he struck first, a raid across the Liao River into the Sui frontier. The emperor answered with an army and fleet counted at 300,000. It never arrived. Rains drowned the roads, disease swept the camps, storms scattered the fleet. The first invasion collapsed without a decisive battle. The next would be different, because the new Sui emperor, Yang, made Goguryeo an obsession. In 611 he mobilized. The dynasty's own chronicle counts 1,133,800 combat troops. A column, it claims, that took 40 days to march out. Historians read the figures as stylized, not audited, but the scale was real, aimed at one Korean kingdom. The giant hit a wall. Goguryeo defense was a deep net of stone mountain fortresses, and the stronghold at Liaodong would not fall. A naval strike at Pyongyang was lured in and shattered, so Emperor Yang gambled. 9 armies, 305,000 men in the record, would bypass the fortresses and rush the capital carrying their own rations. Loads so crushing, soldiers dumped them in secret and arrived hungry. Waiting was a man history barely knows, Eulji Mundeok. No recorded birth or death, one campaign, then he vanishes. The chronicles say he entered the Sui camp under pretext of surrender talks, to see how starved they were, and slipped away. Then he began losing, on purpose. 7 engagements in a day, the record claims, each a staged defeat, drawing the Sui deeper, hungrier, farther from home. At the walls of Pyongyang, unbroken, fully provisioned, the Sui commander received a message from Eulji Mundeok, a poem. Among the oldest surviving lines in Korean literature: your victories are already lofty, knowing when enough is enough, will you not stop? Flattery shaped like a blade. He read it correctly and ordered retreat. The retreat had to recross a river. The Salsa, today's Chongcheon in North Korea. Goguryeo was waiting. As the column waded in, Eulji Mundeok struck. Pursuit, ambush, annihilation at the crossing. The famous dam released at the perfect moment in no early source. Later legend, the records claim, of some 305,000 men, about 2,700 came home. Stylized numbers surely. A real catastrophe. Yang tried again in 613, and turned back to crush a rebellion. Again in 614, nothing. The war had hollowed his empire. In 618 the Sui collapsed, its emperor assassinated. Goguryeo hadn't just survived a superpower, it helped destroy one. Eulji Mundeok's name never appears after 613, but the Sui's replacement would be stronger, and the next war would begin inside Goguryeo's own palace. The year the Sui fell, both thrones changed. In China rose the Tang. In Goguryeo, Yeon died. His half-brother Yeon, a veteran who knew what invasion cost, chose conciliation. Captives exchanged, students sent, embassies traded, the era's diplomatic grammar, not submission. But as Tang hardened, even the peacemaker built, from 631 the 1,000-li wall, a fortress chain in the west. Its overseer, the hardliner Yeon Gaesomun. The court wanted him busy and far away, it kept him armed instead. By 642, King and Strongman were plotting each other's deaths. Yeon Gaesomun moved first. He staged a banquet at a troop review and invited the court's leadership, about 100 nobles by the traditional count. His soldiers killed them all. Then he marched to the palace and killed the king. On the throne he placed Yeon's nephew, Bojang, who reigned 26 years and ruled none of them. The office that mattered, Yeon took himself. Dae-mang-ni-ji, dictator in all but name. So who was he? Careful. Almost everything we know arrives through his enemies. Tang and Silla records paint theatrical menace. 5 swords worn at once, servants kneeling as steps for his horse. Confucian historians damned the regicide. Modern nationalists crowned him Korea's greatest hero. Scholars split the difference. A real strategist who chose resistance, and a strong man whose rule hollowed out everyone who could come after. Hold both portraits. the second is loaded. That same year a visitor came north. Kim Chanchu of Silla, the southern kingdom Goguryeo once saved, begging for an alliance against Baekje, which had just killed his daughter. Goguryeo's price, return land Silla took a century before. Chanchu refused, was imprisoned, barely got out. Remember that refusal. 6 years later he sailed to the Tang court and secured his alliance there. Goguryeo's two greatest enemies had just become one. In 645 the reckoning came. Emperor Taizong, China's most celebrated ruler, invaded in person, flying the murdered king as justification. Over 100,000 fighting men in the documented record. At first everything worked. Frontier fortresses fell one by one. A relief army reported at 150,000 was routed. The road in lay open. Then the Tang reached a small mountain fortress called Ansi. Inside Ansi, a garrison reported at about 5,000. Outside, an emperor who had never failed. Assaults came 6 or 7 times a day by some accounts. Catapults pounding the ramparts by daylight, defenders rebuilding them overnight, stuffing breaches with timber. Weeks became a month. A month became 3. The army that had rolled over the frontier could not take one hill town, so the Tang built a mountain. For some 60 days thousands of laborers piled an earthen ramp against the fortress. It rose, it reached the ramparts, then it collapsed. Before the Tang could react, the defenders stormed out and took the mound, the empire's siege engine, now a Goguryeo strongpoint. 3 days of assault failed to retake it. Winter comes early to Liaodong, the food was gone. Taizong ordered retreat into cold and snowstorm. The great campaign had failed. Here the record forgets the hero. The commander who stopped an emperor is nameless in every early source. Korea's 12th century historian lamented the name was already lost. The one Koreans use today, Yang Manchun, surfaces 1,000 years later, apparently from a Chinese novel, the famous arrow that took the emperor's eye. Also legend, what's documented. Taizong died in 649, Goguryeo unconquered. The empires had learned the walls could not be broken. The next assault would not aim at them. 15 years on, the geometry changed. In 660, Tang and Silla destroyed Baekje, Goguryeo's southern partner. In 663 they crushed its resistance and its Japanese allies at sea. Goguryeo now stood alone, enemies north and south. Tang tested the vice, besieged Pyongyang in 661, and failed. Yeon Gaesomun wiped out a Tang column at the Salsu River. While he lived, Goguryeo did not break. But 70 years of war had drained its men and grain. The fortress had never been stormed. It was tiring. Then, mid-660s, Yeon Gaesomun died in his bed. Even his death is a blur. 3 sources, 3 different years. He left a state built around 1 man and 3 sons. The eldest, Namsang, inherited the dictatorship and rode out to inspect the frontier. While he was gone, his brothers Namjin and Namsun seized the capital, declared him a traitor, and killed his son. The kingdom no empire could break had begun breaking itself. Cornered, the heir crossed to Tang, the empire his father fought all his life, and offered the one weapon it never had, himself. A guide who knew every fortress, every road, every commander. Tang gave him rank, and a command in invading his homeland. The bleeding ran both ways. Within months, Yeon Gaesomun's own brother defected south to Silla with 12 fortresses. What the empires couldn't take by force, Goguryeo had begun to give away. Tang moved at once. In 667 the veteran Li Ji, who had fought here in 645, crossed the Liao with Namsang guiding, and the frontier fell. In 668 he crossed the Yalu. Silla marched from the south. The armies converged on Pyongyang, the capital Jiangsu chose in 427, and our cold open began. A month in, the command split. Bojang sent officials to offer surrender. Namjin refused, pulled back into the inner city and fought on. Back to the night we began. Namjin had entrusted the inner city's defense to a Buddhist monk named Sinchung. Sinchung judged the cause lost, and secretly sent word to the Tang. 5 days later he walked down and opened the gates. The inner city was stormed. Namjin turned his blade on himself, failed, and was taken alive. King Bojang was seized. 28 kings, 700 years. Goguryeo, the kingdom that broke empires, was gone. The aftermath reads like a parable. A reported 200,000 people marched to Tang, Namsang the guide, richly rewarded. Namjin the diehard, dead in exile. The monk at the gates, reportedly titled by the emperor. Bojang the puppet, given a governorship years later, used it to plot a revival, and died in exile, still scheming. But what killed the kingdom wasn't betrayal alone. 70 years of war bled it. The alliance crushed it, the succession split it. All 3, and only the last, could open a gate. Since episode 1 we've kept a refrain, defeated, and then rebuilt. Gojoseon fell, Goguryeo rose. Goguryeo burned, twice and rebuilt. Stand at that open gate in 668, and the refrain turns inside out. Nobody defeated Goguryeo, not the Sui with their million-man count, not Taizong with his mountain of earth. Its walls were never broken from outside. Everything was opened from within, a palace, a succession, a gate. The hardest enemy was never outside the wall. But the refrain was not finished. Tang planted an occupation government on the ruins, and within 2 years it was in revolt. Then Silla turned on the empire it had invited in, armed the very rebels it once helped defeat, and fought a superpower for the peninsula itself. That war, the small kingdom that outlasted everyone, and then dared to fight China alone, is episode 6, and it ends on a question still argued today: did Silla ever truly unify Korea at all? Because on Goguryeo's own ground in the north, something was already beginning to rise. This was episode 5 of Untold Korea. Subscribe. Goguryeo didn't end, it moved.